Hello folks, this is lesson 5. We're going to be talking now for the next few lessons about the Garden of Eden story. It is probably the most distributed story on the planet ever. It may be the most important story on the planet. It is about personal development. It's about the secret of how to live a fulfilled life, both spiritually and personally. It has been so misrepresented as a historical story, a story about the beginning of mankind. Let me show you the problem. Here's the book, my book, with the picture of the tree of life on the cover. You notice in the center a tree. On it is fruit. Then there's leaves. And then there's a snake around the tree. Now, have you ever encountered a tree of life? Probably not. Okay. Have you ever, this snake in the story talks. Have you ever met a talking snake? Of course not. So if you haven't encountered a tree of life and you don't know what it is, and you haven't encountered a talking snake, what kind of a story are we reading? It's certainly not a historical story. It could be a fairy tale, it could be a fiction. But what you're going to see is that it's an allegory. Now let me explain an allegory. An allegory is usually an adventure story about a key character. That character represents each one of us. For example, in the book entitled The Odyssey, which is an epic poem, that's an allegory. It's about a warrior king who, in leaving battle, spent 10 years getting to his home, which really is only 3-day sail. In those 10 years, he encounters an awful lot of problems, and he overcomes the problems. In the course of doing that, he develops his character. So an allegory is often about character development. It's not about the adventure itself. The adventure is the background. It's how a person encounters problems, how they overcome them, how the problems overcome them, and through that story, that we learn about ourselves and how we are to live. We will see that the Garden of Eden is such an allegory. It's a story, but it's about each one of us. It's not about characters that lived 6,000 years ago. It's brilliantly written by a person that I call Eve. I call the author Eve because there's so much femininity in the story, or in the allegory. That's what I was calling. Now, here I want to show you an image of the tree of life on fabric from the Olmec culture, which existed in 1600 to 350 BCE. That's a long time ago. That's long before the Spaniards were here. All over the world, this story was so important that the tree of life has been carved on, we've been found on every continent, carved on stone, on wood, woven into fabric, because it was such an important self-development story. It was a self-help story, and it is a very cleverly written story, so people would sit around the fire at night and discuss it endlessly. Then they would apply it to their lives and see if it worked, if they really did become more joyful in very difficult situations. Now let's go to one of the most important first lines in the story. The lines begin, being gods commanded. Now, the term being gods is a literal translation of Jehovah Elohim. Jehovah Elohim has been translated the Lord God in most current translations. But Jehovah Elohim does not mean the Lord God. It means what it says, being gods, plural. We have been told over and over and over again that the Hebrews worshiped a single God. Yet, right here in this story, we've got gods in plural. The Bible begins, Jehovah Elohim created heaven and earth. The gods created heaven and earth. So that's plural. So the Hebrews worshipped a single God, a being, but also within that God, multiple gods. So it says, being gods commanded. And there went up a mist, and a mist is inspiration from the land, which is the Hebrew word is eretz. And that land is a metaphor for our unreceptive, unreflective consciousness. So what the author is saying is that in the beginning of each one of our lives, our unconsciousness sent up a mist to us. And then it says, and it watered the whole face of the earth, Adamah, which is the Hebrew word for earth, which is our receptive, reflective consciousness. So we can understand this in two ways. One, when we begin life in the womb, our unconsciousness inspired by our unconsciousness sending mist, inspiration to us. On the right-hand side, and being gods formed a person of dust of the earth. The word person, it comes from the Hebrew word Adam. Now, in all translations that I know of, it reads, and God formed Adam. There is no proper name in the Garden of Eden story, Adam. There's no man is named Adam. The word Adam means person or human beings. So, and being gods formed a person, which is each one of us, because this is an allegory, of dust of the earth. Dust is inspiration from our receptive, reflective consciousness. And breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. So divine life, according to Eve, is breathed into each one of us when we receive inspiration of life. And the person became a living being. So in the womb, a person becomes divine life, becomes not just human life, but divine life. Then, right now, for each one of us, we can either live unconsciously as land, or we can live consciously as earth. And when we're consciously as earth, we can begin to be inspired by our unconsciousness, by inspiration coming through our unconsciousness. That's how I read this passage. Now, you may want to reflect on that and decide if you agree with me. But it's you can see now why they sat around the fire and discussed it. It's very deep. Eve is saying that we are born divine, that we are born full of divine life, and we're born fulfilled. On this next page, we see the picture of divine life in two people. Look at the picture of the baby. Is that human life or divine life? Look at the picture of the woman. Is that divine life or human life? In essence, Eve is saying that we are born divinely perfect. in soul oneness with ourselves and others. A child loves himself and others easily. A child feels inherently worthy. A child is not full of division, which manifests itself in anxiety and worry. The bottom line here is that Eve is saying that we are born fulfilled. We are born with perfect mental health and spiritual health. That is the norm that we want to seek the rest of our life. When we are going through the world today and we're buying things and we're talking and we're searching, what we're searching for is the experience we had when we were born, which is complete fulfillment, complete oneness with our mother, with our father, complete oneness with ourselves, complete sense of worthiness, and we lose that as we become enculturated. In this next slide, we see that Jesus agrees with Eve. Jesus says, "For my mother, she brought me forth. She gave me birth, physical birth. But my mother, however, the true, she gave to me life." By that he means divine life. The mother, the true, however, the true is Godmother. People think that Jesus just talked about God Father, but he also talked about God Mother, and here he's doing it in this poem. That the mother that he experienced is one that gives us our real life, our real divine life. In the next slide, Jesus says, "When you should know yourselves, then they will know you," that's people around us, "and you will realize that you are the sons and daughters of the Father who lives." Now, this is an incredibly important poem from Jesus. What he's saying is that as we begin to know ourselves, we begin to know the experience that we had when we were born. And others were going to see us as very different. We're not just human beings wandering around. They will see that we are manifesting a type of life that is so unusual. And we will realize from their reaction to us that we are the sons and daughters of the Father who lives divine life. In other words, we share that life with Spirit. That Spirit is the word I'm using for God. You can translate that in any way you want to. But this poem clearly says that not just Jesus is the Son of God, but that we are all Son of God. Now, it's going to be up to each one of us to decide if that is true. The next slide, Jesus says, "The light exists inward of a man of light." In other words, as one knows oneself and becomes the divine life, he becomes out of darkness and he becomes light to the world. And he comes to be light to the world, all of it. If he does not come to be light, the darkness is he. So, to make this practical, can you think of people in your life who are light and people who are dark? Okay, the ones who are light are those who know themselves like they knew themselves when they were born. They're more like what they were when they were born. Those who are dark are those who have taken on false selves and are not what they were when they were born. So here you have Jesus' philosophy of personal development. You leave the dark side that you've learned, the false selves that you've learned to cover up the light within you, and you become the inner light that you are. Buddha, in this next slide, says, "The master abandons the dark way for the light way." So he agrees with Jesus, and he agrees with Eve. Light is our essence. And being on the way of light is to become more and more the essence of who we are. So that is the end of Lesson 5. You may want to rewatch this. You may want to go through those poems very carefully. But the essence of the way of Eve, Abraham, Buddha, and Jesus is this. We are not born in sin. We are not born unfulfilled. We are not born as creatures of bad habits. We are born absolutely fulfilled in oneness with ourselves and with others. We're able to love others. We're able to receive their love. Now, there's some children who are born who are defective mentally in some other way. Yes, that's different, but they're talking about normal children, and they observed that they are what you might call the model of what we want to be the rest of our lives. In other words, when you think of what you want to be, you can say, well, I want to be rich, I want to be well known, I want to be this, I want to be that. And they say, those are all false selves. Your real self is being what you were when you had nothing. You were a bare baby, but you had everything. You had worthiness, you knew it inside, you felt one with others who felt one with you. You were ready to love everyone. You had the essence of mental health and spiritual health. That is pivotal to understanding the way of Eve, Abraham, Buddha, and Jesus. So that ends Lesson 5. If you like this lesson, click below on like. If I suggest as homework that you go through this lesson again and read those poems very carefully. I went through them quickly. But you notice that Eve is using very simple words, but they're very profound. And you have to decide for yourself, am I human or am I divine? Look at the picture of the woman and the child. Do you see divinity in them or do you see humanness in them? Look around you at a puppy, a newborn puppy. Look at a newborn babe. Look at a flower. Is that all, are those all different kinds of life? Plant life, animal life, human life? Or is it all divine life at various levels of development and evolution? Can you look around at the people around you and can you see darkness and light in them? Do you know which people are light in your life and which people are darkness in your life? Can you see that when people are darkness in your life that they're living a false self? They're full of false selves. Can you see that when you're surrounded by people of light that they're real? That their hearts are open to you and you're open to them. When a person of light walks into the room, it lightens the room, right? When you walk into a room filled with dark people, you know it immediately. So Buddha is correct, I think, in saying that in order to grow, in order to evolve, you leave darkness in yourself and you leave the people around you who are dark. And you get on the way of light, which is the way of self-development, which is the way of developing yourself as you were first born. I hope this was helpful to you. Click on like below if it is. You can be sure to register on the website to receive the emails that'll answer your questions and comments that you put below. I enjoyed being with you today, and I look forward to see you on Lesson 6.